Rob, Andrew, thank you so much for sitting down and doing this. Before we get into anything rugby orientated, like you're obviously the CEO of Sussex now, how are you finding the difference between rugby and now cricket? Because you've been in management within rugby. How are you finding the difference in two sports? Is there any difference really, or is there anything that you have that's a bit of a different?
Yes and no. I mean, there's lots of the principles are all the same. You know, sports, businesses, which is what they are very similar in terms of getting the right people together to try and perform, whether that's on the field or off the field. And obviously, being chief exec, it's a slightly wider brief, clearly, because it's the business and off the field, as well as working with, you know, your director of cricket and your head coach to try and create an environment and a team that is successful within the constraints of budgets and everything else. So all the principles are the same, whether it's a rugby club, football club, cricket club, whatever, or an amateur hockey club or anything. I think that's sort of. I suppose the standout difference from a team and a performance element with cricket is two things, I think. One, the central contract model in cricket, which means that you produce a Jofra Archer, then you probably won't see him again. Yeah. So,
but then there's the subsidising of contracts within the counties, isn't that? That's how that works.
Yeah, I mean, financially, you get recompensed, but you don't have the player.
Yeah, I've spoken to people about that. It's a really interesting dynamic within the sport about when you lose an England player, you do get essentially their finances back on what you were paying that player, but it's always hard. It's like, are you going to find another Jofra for that money? Like that's the fundamental basis.
Are you going to find another Jofra regardless of the money?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Performance terms, because there's a reason he's done what he's done, and they don't drop off trees. So, you know, that whole creating a team and a performance when your best player suddenly just disappears, which obviously we've suffered from this year. Been amazing to see Jofra do what he does, and that in the end, that's a big part of what we're here for, is to produce international players. So that's a sort of a challenge that all counties have to manage, and that's the nature of the structure of cricket, which I actually support, and I think it's the right thing, because the national team must be the number one priority. And I suppose the second dynamic when you're looking at team and team structures is the different formats of cricket that, you know, 20 over, 50 over, 4-day championship, now the 100 next year. That obviously has quite a challenging dynamic around player skill sets. And on top of that, linked to that is the globalization of the T20 leagues. And suddenly your players, they're here 1 minute, now they might be in the IPL if they're good enough, or at the end of the season, you know, we've got Chris Jordan and Laurie Evans in the Caribbean playing in the CPL. Phil Salt's going to play in the Big Bash. Luke Wright played in the Big Bash for years. There's a dynamic there which is obviously very different and fast moving that probably wasn't there 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, there's nothing like that in rugby, is there? I guess the only thing in rugby that I think you see is the switch between union and league. And the people moving from that, but that's a very clear cut. Game is not different, but it's not overly a change of skill set, essentially.
No, and it's basically there are differences clearly, and there are certain positions that are very different in rugby league to rugby union. So there are some big differences in terms of players being able to transfer. But you're with that club. You either play league with this club or union with this club. Cricket's got this, you're playing for multiple clubs in multiple formats, pretty much all year round. Yes, the international players go off for periods of time, as they are now in the Rugby World Cup, but they don't disappear from the club as internationals for the whole year.
Yeah, well, they've changed the World Cup. The season changes in rugby, doesn't it, to adhere to the World Cup. so you don't really lose your best players as
Not
such.
really. I mean, there is a slight overlap in the season, so you will lose your international players for part of the domestic season, but only part of it, not for the whole of it, like you do in cricket. Joffre's played 2 games for us this year, and may not play many more.
Have you felt like there's a difference in structure, like the difference in structure within directorship of like rugby to cricket, like, or do you feel like you can transfer sort of the way you run business in rugby into the way you run business in cricket, or has it had to completely change your outlook personally? Has it had to change a little bit?
No, not really. I mean, no, it hasn't really had to change because you've got similar structures. You've got similar board structures. You've got similar. I mean, fundamentally, sports clubs have 2 or 3 business functions. They have a team on the field. They have an off-the-field commercial team. They have a stadium operation. And obviously in Sussex, we look after community cricket in Sussex as well. So there are effectively 3 strands to what is the business of cricket here. A pro cricket department, a community cricket department, a commercial department that delivers revenue, and an operations department that effectively runs the ground. That's very similar. That's all sports organisations.
Most sports are going to have the same thing.
So
around
you've got different, not necessarily different priorities, but the functions are very, very similar. And on the pro side of sport, you have a balancing act of growing your own players through your system, your academy, and recruitment. And you're constantly having this debate between how good's your development system, how good are the players coming out of it to play in the first team, because playing in the first team is fine, but they have to be good enough. And how good's your recruitment in terms of bringing players in? You don't just want to bring players in the whole time, and recruitment's not easy in all sports. You've got the overseas element, you've got the home, the elements of recruitment from within the domestic market, but they're all, challenges that all counties face.
Do you find that recruitment's quite a hard task? Things with, for example, I know in cricket, bowlers are a really rare commodity to get at the moment, and they're tough to get them. Like if they're good enough, they move on to England. And then you try and keep them on the pitch. Like, so this year, I know you at Sussex have had guys been injured quite a lot. Is recruitment probably a big well, actually the turnover rate of injuries in rugby is quite big as well, I guess as well, but the squads are really, really big as well, aren't they?
Squads are much bigger. I mean, some rugby squads, they're carrying 40, 45 players, so the cost base is enormous.
So we found the finances are completely different as well.
Yeah, they are different. I mean, there's no doubt that rugby's finances very much driven by private investment. So that's the other dynamic in cricket, which is different. So if you look at football and rugby, I suspect a lot of the professional clubs are running at an operational loss, which is being funded by the chairman.
Right, yeah.
So the chairman is effectively funding a loss-making business. Cricket doesn't have that. Cricket doesn't have owners in the same way. So you have to run the business, and you have to make ends meet ultimately. So that again is that's a good discipline, clearly.
It's much more of a standard business structure, I guess, as well, isn't it? That's it's kind of a better way to look at it.
Well, it is, yeah.
Not falling into someone's pocket.
No, sport. Certainly, I was involved in rugby for a long time, and I was at Newcastle for 11 years. We lost money every year. We probably lost an average of £2 million a year for 11 years, which that was the operating model that we worked on. That the chairman, I went through two chairmen actually, but that was the operating model. Cricket doesn't have that. Cricket, you have to run the business, so you can only spend what you have, and that's the thing that not necessarily everybody understands in sport, is that it's not limitless to say, well, why don't you go and buy some more players? Why don't you? You can't find them. So you talk about bowlers. Where do you find them? And B, even if you had loads of money. So you can't find them if you had loads of money, but actually you have to live within your means. So we can't just say go and get another 10 international cricketers to come and play for you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that.
It's really hard when you see people on social media and they're just saying, I'll replace them with, and you need to get this batsman, that batsman. It's like, well, every other team's trying to hold on the players they've got anyway, especially if they're any good. So if you're trying to get someone, you're either getting someone on the way up or someone that's maybe just not found form for a little while. And so, you're always trying to have... I think someone like Chris Jordan here at Sussex was a really good example. When I was playing with him, he was like his career probably wasn't going where he wanted it to be. And then he jumped ship, and it was a bit of a gamble from Sussex's point of view. But wow, what a gamble it changed. You've got someone that you got them at a good time and then you built them up, and that's an ideal. But that's not the scenario that happens absolutely everywhere.
In an ideal world, you would always do that. So all your recruitment decisions would turn out to be fantastic, and you'd turn them into a Chris Jordan, or look at what Ollie Robinson has done here since he came here.
It's kind of moneyballing it as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, and there's a whole raft of how much money have you got. There is a moneyball element. How good are you at improving players? How good are you at bringing players in and making them better? How good are you at developing your own players who've come through the system, who then step up, whether that's a Phil Salt or a Delray Rawlins, or hopefully George Garton's talent, which is clearly there, will flourish. But you never know. That's the beauty of sport, is you never really know until you're out there, because that's ultimately the proof. The ruthless nature of sport is there is no hiding place. You can't. You're out there, whether you're a rugby player, footballer, cricket player, and the proof will be in the pudding. It's a very, from that point of view, it's a very straightforward business. Yeah, because it's everybody can see every day.
Yeah. No, you're right. You actually played a bit of cricket. You played a bit of cricket, didn't you? I think people forget that you played a little bit for Yorkshire, second team, bit first class. Did you play this year?
I've played a few games this year. I played
for
the Lord's Taverners a bit. I play a few charity games here and there.
And you played cricket before you started professionally in rugby?
Yeah, I grew up at school playing rugby and cricket. Those were the two sports that I spent a lot of time doing. I went to university, lucky enough to go to Cambridge University, played rugby and cricket there. So I played varsity match rugby and cricket. Played my league cricket in North Yorkshire, South Durham, and on the back of my Cambridge cricket, I did play one summer of Yorkshire Seconds in 1985, which is a long time ago. I actually played with Mark Robinson, who, as an 18-year-old,
my first coach,
made his debut for Yorkshire Seconds, having just left school in 1985. He was at school in Hull, and he played Yorkshire Twos at the back end of the summer of 1985.
Wow.
So that was, I was doing my rugby stuff then as well, and I was never going to be a good enough cricketer, but I loved cricket. I played a lot. I had a break from the game through the rugby for probably about 10-15 years, and then started playing again maybe 10 years ago. Just I don't play. I still play social charity cricket if I can get a game.
So when did let's go into rugby, because there's some really interesting stuff there. When did you shift into rugby?
Well, it wasn't really a shift. It was just a sort of they were both going along at the same time, sort of.
When did you kind of know that rugby was going to be the standout?
Rugby probably in '85. Probably was my last year at university. I was selected to play for England whilst at university.
Right,
so
wow.
I played in the Five Nations. It was a different era. It was an amateur game.
Yeah, we spoke about that before, saying how rugby was amateur then. Must be just such a completely different world.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was the world we lived in. That was the world of rugby union in the mid '80s, as it had been in the '70s, the '60s, the '50s, all the way back. Didn't go professional till '95.
Okay.
So my England period, which was mid '80s to mid '90s, was all amateur. So we had jobs, we did day jobs, we trained in the evenings. Played for our clubs at the weekend. I played for Wasps in London, worked in property in London, trained Tuesday, Thursday. That's just what we did.
That was the reality.
And then, if you're good enough, you got picked for England. we trained a little bit for England matches and preparation for World Cups, and so it was just a wholly different. It was a whole different.
But playing for England surely has no difference on what it means to someone then to what it is now. Playing for England, you're internationally representing.
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, you could argue that we had to work harder to play for England in the amateur days because we were trying to hold down a job and be as good as we could, not as a professional sportsman, but as a the best amateur sports people that we could be. So we were training every evening, lunchtimes, weekends, whilst holding down a job. We weren't training as hard as these guys are now. I mean, they're full-time professional athletes, so they're obviously going to be different. But the importance to us of playing for England was just as great, as it is to the guys now who are in the World Cup in Japan.
You mentioned about as much as these guys that train now, but you were quite well known for how hard you trained, and we'd spoken about work with people like Dave Aldred and the meticulous stuff that he puts into the work that he goes with people, and that you'd met him, you were seeking someone like him out on your own, off your own back, and you were travelling quite a big distance to go get it. When did you kind of decide to make that whole because it's very, very easy in an amateur world to just kind of do what you do, and when did you kind of make a conscious decision that you were going to further it a lot more and become even better, and that allowed you to be at that high skill level? I guess meeting someone like Dave. Yeah,
I mean, it was sort of around 1990, 91 that it was the sort of second half of my international career. So the first half, mid 80s to late 80s, I was pretty much self-taught with goal kicking.
Yeah.
Didn't have a coach. I practiced a lot, probably half the time practicing the wrong things.
Right, okay.
So technically was reinforcing bad habits instead of reinforcing good habits.
Okay.
And then sort of halfway through my England career, Dave appeared on the scene again, amateur. He was an ex-rugby union player.
Did you actively seek him out? Did you have the awareness to know that you were reinforcing bad habits, or was it until you brought coach along that you'd realise what you'd been doing sort of retrospectively?
Yeah, it was a bit of everything really. He started working with one or two players in Bath because he lived in Bristol, worked in Bristol, and he worked with Stuart Barnes and Jonathan Webb, who were in the England setup, and sort of Dave was doing some coaching at the Bath Rugby Club. He then got introduced to others, and through the network you sort of see who's doing what, and it just became clear to me that I had two choices really. I either carry on doing what I was doing, which was okay, but it wasn't at the level I wanted it to be at, or I try something different, which is, do I work with somebody? And Dave was around, he was clearly having an impact on other players. So I took a positive decision to say, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to just actually, I think we had a conversation earlier where I was already 28 when I first met Dave, so I'd already played for England for about 5 years.
Yeah.
But I just made a conscious decision to say, what I'm doing is not good enough, it's not where I want it to be. So, right, Dave, pretty much, I'm yours, just, treat this as a project from a coaching perspective, because he was on his coaching journey, starting that, which obviously now he's done all sorts of things, including golf and all sorts of other things. So he was on his journey, I was on mine. He then, he was working with other players as well. I effectively introduced him to Jonny Wilkinson, and then that journey started with those two. But for me, it was very much a coaching player experiment to see the impact of high quality coaching, and it was transformational.
Did you actively sort that out on your own? So there was no discussion with sort of your coaching staff, or you were just like, I need this for me and I've got to go get it?
There's always conversations. These things are never just one thing, and they're always about chatting to coaches, chatting to people who, and the initial discussion was around the sort of England setup, and people saying, have you met Dave? Have you worked with Dave? Have you seen what he's doing with these guys? And then you sort of go, well, actually, okay, I'll give that a go. So there's constantly, you're not just suddenly having a light bulb moment where you go, I need to see Dave. There's conversations happening. But I did make a conscious decision. I could have just said, no, I'm fine. I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. But I did absolutely make a conscious decision to say, I want to see where this can take me. And that's where amateur game, I used to travel to Bristol on a Sunday. Dave would travel up to London. Nobody was paying anybody any expenses, or none of us getting paid any money to do this.
Of each other.
He was doing it to try and improve as a coach. I was doing it to try and improve as a player.
Yeah.
And through that period from about 90 through to 95, which was where my goal kicking percentages went through the roof, Dave was involved with a bit of England stuff on the back of that, came to the 95 World Cup, then the Jonny story unfolded, and then Dave's journey sort of unfolded as well.
What did he get you doing? No, what are the sort of sessions looking like that you're getting to do?
Well, I mean, the start point was a technical issue. So the start point is, how good is your technique? So is your technique going to hold up under pressure? And then working back from that, trying to then groove the technique, which meant that you mentally, you're doing two things. You're doing a physical thing, which then helps the mental side of the game, because you know that you're being coached and taught properly to do X, Y, and Z. The outcome is over here. How do I get from here to here? And the technique to allow me to do what I want to do, which is effectively, in simple terms, kick a ball in a straight line. I mean,
there's a lot more that goes in with it.
But that's fundamentally what you're trying to do.
True. Yeah, it's a
fundamentally. I need to kick this ball from here through those two pieces of wood over there. And I need to kick it. If I kick it in a straight line and I set it off in the right direction, subject to the wind not doing too much, that's what I want to do. Right, how do I do that? Which is but that's what you have to boil it down to. And that's what Dave did. He broke my technique down, looked at it. It was all over the place, quite frankly. So there was a recognition early on that technique is not going to hold up under pressure all the time. It might work 50% of the time, which is what it was doing, which is what my success rate was. The other 50%, something will happen and you won't even know why it's happened. So you've just done something, missed a kick, and you won't know why that ball has gone there.
That was the work that we eventually did with him when he started working with Kevin Shine at England Cricket. We were kind of his guinea pigs for bowlers, and having read his book Pressure Principle, so he's got C shape and J shape. So he's I actually saw something he put recently of a kicker in the World Cup, and he was kind of going like, oh, this is classic C shape and the ball didn't go through the post. Like, it's J shape is what you're looking for. But when he translated that into cricket, it was we were just, like you're saying, we were just kind of training and hoping, and kind of 50% hit, 50% didn't, and then really nailed down into like the if you miss, do you know how you've missed? Like, if you're trying to hit a target on the floor, do you know why you've missed? Do you know how it felt? And then translating that result into a feel so that you could... The best thing was self-correction. I felt the best thing that it gave you was self-correction, so that you, if you knew you missed, in the occasion you missed, and there's always going to be that time because percentages are kind of against you, and you have that time you missed, but can you correct it to go that bit better?
And that was the key thing for me, was I got to a point through probably 6 to 9 months initially of real hard graft, of having to change something that was ingrained from probably when I was at school. I then got to a stage where I did know what was right, and I knew how it felt, and I knew when I hadn't hit it. I knew when it wasn't quite right, and if it went over, people would think it was a good kick because it's gone over, and I would be thinking, I got away with that. It was okay because there's a margin of error. But I also knew if I missed it, why I missed it. What was the thing that I didn't do right, which was the self-correction bit. Whereas prior to that, I had no idea.
Yeah, you're just kind of guessing.
I'm guessing. And that was I was guessing in international matches sometimes.
Which is madness, isn't it?
So occasionally you'd hook it to the left and you think, well, I'm hooking it today. So you'd then start it off just outside the right-hand post next time and you'd hit it dead straight.
Right.
Because your technique is not hot. Your technique's not, you're not trusting your technique.
Yeah.
So I then set it off outside the right-hand post thinking, well, if it goes like the last one, it'll come in. And then I hit one that's gone dead straight, which I didn't know why I'd hit it dead straight. So it's now gone past the right-hand post.
Yeah.
And that's the correction piece, because the technique was wrong in the first place, which is the sort of, I was a lot of C shape in Dave's words and not enough J shape, and correcting from a natural C shape to a J shape was really hard.
Did you go backwards to begin with? Did you almost feel like you went backwards?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, no, I felt like this is, because it was really uncomfortable.
And a lot of athletes get scared of that. A lot of guys I've coached before, they're worried about whatever they've built up to that point. You feel like if you're going to change, you're going to lose it, and it's gone. And then that's a big gamble, big bit of trust you got to have, especially in not only yourself but the coach as well. You went through that? Yeah,
and I was quite lucky in a way, because I was already 28. I was already well into my England career. There were times when I wasn't kicking for England because somebody else was doing it, either Jonathan Webb or Simon Hodgkinson. So I'd almost sort of lost the kicking job. I was still in the team. So I was in a position where I could comfortably take the risk, if you know what I mean, because I was almost had nothing to lose, really. I knew I wasn't good enough. So if this was a complete disaster, I wasn't making myself any worse off.
Yeah, okay.
So I had the confidence to go, I want to see where this takes me.
Yeah.
I want to go on this journey for myself as well as with Dave. And the outcome was like, wow. Yeah. This is where I want to be.
Yeah, it's kind of no coincidence he's taken, like, not only yours, Jonny Wilkinson's, Francesco Molinari, like who he's working with now. Golf is very similar to that point.
Yeah.
He makes big comparisons between golf. Because even that whole, I've hooked it one way, I've done it before, and then you kind of recorrect, and then you smash it straight, and you're like, well, it's gone in the trees the other side.
Yeah.
But
that's goal kicking. That was my goal kicking, and that's where my golf is now.
Yeah, so trying to find that happy medium, try and see if you can get the kicking into golf. So once you've kind of made this move, well, you said like he worked with Jonny Wilkinson, and you kind of helped. You were at Newcastle when Jonny Wilkinson turned up. Someone like him, what made him so much, both yourself and him, so much better than everyone else at the times they were in?
I think in the end, clearly work ethic is massive. I thought I had a decent work ethic, which I think I did, and I think people would say that. Yeah. Jonny was off the scale in his work ethic, which he would probably admit himself sometimes overdid it. So that desire and willingness to learn and work at what you're trying to do, and obviously having the trust in the coach, the trust in what he is doing is going to work. And that is where the trust and faith has to come in with the coach. And that relationship then becomes really important, because you then get into a bit of a virtuous cycle that I did, where I trusted the technical aspect completely. I knew, because of practice, I knew if I got the technical bit right that we were practicing, the result would be the right result, because I had evidence. So I knew when I didn't quite get it right, the ball wasn't in the right place, but I knew absolutely that because what Dave was teaching technically was correct, if I could deliver that, then the ball would go where I wanted.
Yours was to do with the laces and the part of the ball, wasn't it? Like, so you knew.
Well, it was. I mean, everybody has certain keys that just allow you to zone out effectively, to focus on what it is you're trying to achieve,
and that helped take away pressure outside your environment, like the external, because you're going to play in front of 50,000 people and plus. That's the big key to that. Is that
it's critical. You can't be sat there looking at the ball, going, "If I kick this, we're going to win or we're going to lose," or I wonder what all these people will think when I'm running at the ball. You can't be in that space. You need to be in the space that puts you technically into the absolute right position, which is how do I get my technique to hold up in relation to to what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I ended up with some keys that were linked to basically focusing on the right part of the ball, focusing on a part of my foot, so I had a feel of where I was trying to hit the ball, and then focusing on really what I call the top of the post, which is to ensure that my follow through went straight. And if you then just keep your focus every single time in practice and when you're in the match on those very small number of things, that allows you to zone out, basically.
Yeah. So Jonny had his moment in the 03 World Cup when he dropped the goal, and you had yours in the 95. Is that exactly what you're thinking then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, it is. It's absolutely the process of this kick. It was the same as, my drop goal in South Africa in the 95 World Cup. Jonny's was obviously in the final in 2003.
They're so similar when you look at the footage, isn't it? It's so similar.
Mine was a lot further out than his, of course, although his was with the wrong foot. That's the other thing to bear in mind.
I actually saw that Matt Dawson was talking about that. It was
with his right foot.
He should have passed it to his left.
His left foot. So Jonny was dropping goals with both feet. So you are not thinking about, I need to drop this goal to win this match.
Yeah.
Because then you're just going to collapse in a heap. You are thinking about the process of drop goal was slightly different, of course, because
moving environment.
Well, you've got to catch the ball, catch it and drop it.
Yep.
So you're still trying to get to the same position once you've dropped it, but you've got two additional bits of it. First of all, you've got to catch the damn thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got to drop it properly.
Yeah.
So the goal kick with the ball on the kicking tee, at least that ain't moving anywhere unless the wind blows it over.
You can do it in your own time.
But drop goal, to be fair to the guys that do them, or any point of a drop goal, it's a moving beast.
Yeah.
And you got people running at you.
Yeah.
Whereas with a penalty or a conversion you do, but they tend not to get close to you. But with a penalty, it's static. There's nobody coming at you. With a drop goal, you've got the opposition flanker probably coming at you as well.
Yeah. So did you have different techniques for both of those?
No, not really. Not really.
Similar
I mean,
technique.
you just had the additional. You had to have the additional focus of catching the ball clearly. If you knocked it on, that was the end of it. But clearly, the thing about the drop goal, the additional difficulty is that the drop. You got to drop it perfectly.
Yeah.
If you drop it so it sort of hits and falls over.
So that's almost another pre-technique to the technique anyway.
Yeah.
But again, that's coming with repetition of practice. And
it does. Yeah.
I think people also forget that when it does get to that level, you've done it so many times. It is like driving a car, and you're trusting in that. Like the reason why you go subconsciously and drive is because you've done it well enough.
Yeah.
You hope.
Yeah.
That it becomes self-conscious.
And
that's
that's the practice. But the key around the coaching, which is the critical thing, which is where the trust comes in and the technique comes in, is, are you practicing the right thing?
Yeah.
Because there's no point. You can practice as much as you want, but if you're practicing hours and hours and hours, practicing the wrong thing that isn't going to deliver, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
It's got to be performance-proof, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to be absolutely performance-proof. In that 95, that was a big political tournament as well. What was it like in that, just around the tournament? Obviously with South Africa winning it, everything that had gone on with, even go watch the film Invictus and everything that goes on in that, but what was it kind of like being in and around it as a tournament? Yeah,
it was fantastic, and as with all World Cups, like the one that's going on in Japan at the moment, there will be it's a game-changing moment. First World Cup in Asia, Japan beating Ireland,
Yeah.
all of these things are historic in their own right. The South Africa World Cup was historic as a World Cup, but it had the political dimension because of Mandela, because of South Africa winning it.
Yeah.
Mandela presenting the trophy to Francois Pienaar, the captain, the film.
Yeah.
And
New Zealand having people like Lomu and just all the hype around that.
Well, the Lomu effect. The Lomu was a historic. Jonah, God rest his soul, is no longer with us. He was only 20 at the time. He passed away at 2015 at 40.
Yeah.
He changed the game.
Was it a big effect that he had?
Oh yeah. He fundamentally was almost the first of the modern type of rugby player in the amateur era. He was almost like a modern day professional, as they are now.
Okay, yeah.
In the amateur era.
Yeah.
Well, nobody had really seen that sort of type of athlete, size, pace, who did what he did. Now, arguably, there's lots more players like him in the modern game because of the development of the game and professionalisation and all the rest of it. But he was he stood out as a game changer for all sorts of reasons.
That's always a big debate you have with any sport of like eras. So like he catalysed. You could probably argue that he catalysed the progression of rugby to the athletes that they are now, having seen what you probably could be back then. How do you kind of compare rugby now till then?
It's very different because it's 20 years, 25 years nearly since professionalism. So you've had a whole cycle of a sport that was 100 years amateur before 1995. It's now had the first phase of professionalism, which has done all sorts of things to the players, to the coaches, just to the way they are. They're full-time, phenomenal athletes.
Yeah. Skill
levels have gone up, physicality's gone up.
But with that, people forget things like the concussions and the injuries. Was that stuff around with you?
Yeah, it was, but not anything like it is
now,
because of the physical force of the game. So we thought we were fit, we thought we were physical. But when you look back, it's like looking back in every era of sport. You look back and you think it's in slow motion when you watch it.
Yeah.
Because that's just the evolution and the progression. So it's come with some challenges that are, perhaps unforeseen at the time, whether it's through injury or concussion or it's just different. But all sports evolve, and you make decisions around professionalism, and then you have to manage the consequences, which is what really is still it's a phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal entertainment sport, isn't it?
Yeah. It is now, especially when they're running at the pace they are and the physicality. It is insane to watch. But still, like you look back at like the '95 World Cup, you do forget like how hard guys are still hitting then, and you do get the odd like someone who's kind of like genetically freakish. Like I met Simon Shaw.
Yeah.
Like Simon is.
Yeah, he's a monster.
He swallowed my hands with his hand.
Martin Bayfield. 6'11".
And you just think, like, how can you run into someone like that?
Yeah.
How can you run in and try and take them down? And then there's obviously the famous footage of Jonny Wilkinson running over
Mike Catt.
Mike Catt,
end,
that's it. And he really flattened. And that is now kind of like you're getting two Jonny Wilkinsons going head on at each other. So, it's a completely different ballgame. But, look, mate, thank you so much for giving time. The stuff around
Pleasure.
Dave, I think Dave is... if no one's ever seen him, like he's really changing a lot of people's careers, especially with things like he's working with Molinari at the moment, and the stuff that he goes into is so meticulous, but it's stuff that I think people don't realise what they're doing, the coaching and the quality of the practice that they're doing. I think you're an example that you realised one way, but also that you chose to go and seek out external advice.
I definitely changed. There's no doubt, and I Jonny would say it as well, and Dave's worked with lots of kickers, and in the end, that's where we said right at the beginning, sport's brutal. There is no hiding place. Whether you're a bowler, batsman, goal kicker, you can't you're not hiding in the office somewhere.
Yeah.
Everybody can see the results.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a tough environment.
Yeah. Would you advise sports people to go and get their own advice externally if they don't feel that they're going the right direction? Because some people can think, "Oh, well, I've got the coach I've got, and that's it. I'm done."
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the end, if you've got to decide yourself whether your performance is where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same performance. So you've got to decide internally, am I happy with what I'm doing? And if you are, fine. If you're Steve Smith and you're scoring all these runs in the Ashes, you probably don't want to change too much.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not happy about where you are and where you want to get to, then you have to change something. And that might be how you practice, it might be how you're coached. Because in the end, as I keep saying, sport's very binary. It's very black and white. Am I taking wickets? Am I scoring runs? Am I kicking goals at 80+%?
Mm-hmm.
If I am, then I'm probably doing something okay.
Yeah.
So might tweak it, but let's not change it too much. If I'm not, what am I going to do about it? Keep doing what I'm doing, or try to find a different way?
Yeah, it could be someone, something, somewhere.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much. It's been amazing. Have a really nice winter.
Look forward to next summer.
And I'll see you next summer. Thanks,
All right,
mate.
cheers,
Thank
mate.
you.
Take care.